This is Chthonia, the world of the dark feminine. Hello and welcome to Chthonia podcast. I'm your host, Breach Burke. This week we are going to start a series on the Navadurgas. Now, I think I posted a social media update saying I was going to do this in January, and I realized that that was a mistake because I've had them on the schedule for this particular month. In fact, today is the 5th day of Navaratri, and Navaratri is when you honor the 9 Navadurgas, which are these different sort of avatars of the goddess Durga. Now, the main story, which I have talked about in other podcasts, is the story of Durga as Mahisasuramardini. She's the one who comes in. There's a. It's actually in several different places. There's something called the Devi Mahatmayam, and then there's also a text called the Sri Chandipat. And within that, there's something called the 700 verses in praise of Durga, the Durga Saptashati. Now, Durga is the goddess who comes, just as a little refresher for those of you who have not heard some of the earlier podcasts that I've done with regard to Tantra and some of these other things that I did a couple of years ago now. And I did do podcasts on the 10 Mahavidyas, and as well as the 8 Matrikas that were a part of this whole Chandi Durga Saptashati. It was all part of the whole drama of that. Now, what happens? Just a quick nutshell, the absolute nutshell version of what happens in this particular part. There's a situation where the gods of the 3 worlds are, there's the 3 worlds, there's Bu, Bhuva, Swaha, and these are taken over by the Mahisasura, which is often translated as the great ego, or the great Asura, or the great demon, the one who is very much, who's overly involved in the material world to the point of being greedy and power hungry and arrogant, or just the reverse as well. Somebody who is just too, the victim all the time and very self-effacing. In both cases, in all of these cases, it's the excess of all the passions and all the emotions. Now, all of these things, there's nothing wrong with any of these things kept in their proper perspective and integrated properly into our lives. But when, one has an excessive, for example, when one gains a city or a power and then they decide that they need to keep pushing it farther and farther because they need to have more and more control, this is where the Asuras, the power of the Asura actually becomes harmful. So what happens in this case is that the Devis themselves, the gods, the Devas and Devis, are forgotten. And so they call on the great Devi to help them, to battle with the Mahisasura. And so this great Devi appears in the form of goddess Durga, who usually rides on either a lion or a tiger, in different versions and aspects. And so Durga appears on the mountains, the Himalayas, because in at least in some part, she is a manifestation of goddess Parvati, who is the spouse of Shiva. And we're going to talk more about Parvati in a moment. So she appears, and the great ego sees her and says, "Oh, I need to possess that woman." So he sends an emissary to her who talks to her, and it's a pretty hilarious conversation because it's just, "Oh, he is so wonderful, he is everything and this and that, and you are nothing, you're just some stupid woman, and you should grovel by his feet immediately because that he would desire to own you and this and that and blah blah." And she's just sitting there and she goes, "Yeah, okay." She's like, "Well, she goes, "Well, of course, yes, he's very great, as you say, but, I'm just a woman. I'm not really thinking. I made this promise that no man can have me unless they defeat me in battle." And he's just thinking, "Well, are you crazy? You can't possibly defeat him in battle." Just going on and on about what a stupid woman she is. And she goes, "Well, yeah, but, what can I say? You just better go back and tell him that." And, of course, he's furious. So he decides to send an army to, as he says, drag her back by her hair. But when they when they show up and tell her to surrender, she says, she doesn't. And so when they go on the attack, she recites a mantra, the home mantra, and she demolishes the entire company. And whoever doesn't get demolished gets eaten by her lion. So thus begins this battle between the great Mahisasura and the Devi. Now Devi is usually shown in three forms: Durga, Saraswati, who is the goddess often shown holding a veena, a musical instrument. And she often is associated with the intellect. And then, of course, you have Lakshmi, Mahalakshmi, who is a goddess of prosperity, who sits at the other side of Durga. And these are known as the Tridevi. But this particular festival, Navaratri, is dedicated to Durga, and it ends at the end of the 9 days. There becomes, shortly thereafter, there is Kali Puja, and after Kali Puja is the festival of Diwali, the festival of lights. So this is sort of in a way, this is almost the end of the year kind of a ritual that then is followed by this new beginning that's suggested by Diwali. So, but this is a time of Durga, of Kali, of the goddesses. And again, in traditional Orthodox Hinduism, this is a time that is, obviously they have great veneration for these deities, but this is also, in some ways there's a potential inauspiciousness to certain times, or at least to certain aspects of the Devi that might be considered a bit more dangerous. And of course, these are the ones that we're interested in this podcast. But we're going to go through all of the 9 Navadurgas. I've actually had a request for this several times, and I've had to put it off because I've had other things on the schedule, and I had almost an entire half of a year at one point where all I did was Hindu deities from Kali down to the 10 Mahavidyas, and it was great series. I think it was a very interesting podcast series, and a lot of people got a great deal out of it. But by the same token, I need to. The Navadurgas are a group that I've not gotten to, and I did not want to do them immediately after doing the other ones. I thought, no, let's give it a break, and let's, because this is not, while I'm very much interested in the deities, in these particular aspect of the Devi in Hinduism, I didn't want to this is not entirely just a podcast about that, so I wanted to break it up a little bit. So now we're back to dealing with the Navadurgas. Now, Nava is, 9. And so these are the 9 sort of avatars of Durga. So we will be going through, I think I've done 1 or 2 of them, so we are going to go through the ones that we have not done. And today we are going to do one called Shailaputri. And she is the first Navadurga of the first of the 9 days. She is worshipped with a ritual that is known as Gatastapana, which is a ritual that's participated in by women in the temple. And let me see if I can give you a description of that particular ritual. The puja is done by using puja items considered holy and symbolic, as they always are. A shallow pan like a utensil made of clay is used as base. 3 layers of mud and navadhyana seeds are scattered in the pan. After that, a bit of water is needed to be sprinkled so the seeds get enough moisture. Then a kalasha is filled with a ganga jal. Supari, a few coins, akshat, which is raw rice mixed with turmeric, and durva grass are put in water. After this, 5 leaves of the mango tree are put around the neck of the kalash, which is then covered by placing a coconut. So this, as you can see, this is a very earth-centered ritual, and there's definitely this idea of women having a power that is certainly connected to the earth and to nature in particular with this particular ritual. So who is Shailaputri? Now, Shailaputri literally means daughter of the mountain. Okay, and she's the daughter of the god Himalaya, of the Himalaya mountains. So, in order to talk about who Shailaputri, this is literally, the Navadurgas seem to go through the life of Parvati, who is the reincarnation of Sati or Shakti. Okay, Sati is when we talk about Shakti, this is the original goddess associated with that primal energy, and she has always been the spouse of Lord Shiva. Now, in the original Sati story, her father is Daksha, okay? And Daksha is one of the progenitors of, of the human race, of the people, and he always performed a great yagna, Mahayagna, which is a big sacrifice. And this sacrifice was considered necessary to maintaining the balance of things. Okay, so he was, so Daksha has, he is a very wealthy and powerful man, and his daughter had many, many suitors. But the only man that she loved was Lord Shiva. So what she would do is, when all the suitors showed up the day that she had to make her choice, Shiva is not there. So she's trembling, and she just says a prayer. She has a garland that she's supposed to put around the neck of her chosen suitor, and she throws it up in the air, and then all of a sudden Shiva appears, and it just lands around his neck. So he becomes her chosen spouse, and Daksha is very unhappy about this because he considers Shiva to be unwashed, and he sits in the with matted hair, and he lives in the woods, and he just considers him to be disrespectful and inappropriate for his daughter. But the choice has been made, and of course, when the marriage takes place, Daksha is he more or less, he doesn't go as far as he basically disowns her. He just sort of she's cut off from her family, and of course, her and Shiva go out and live in the forest, or out in the mountains, and they're so they're on their own. But then she comes to find out that her father is holding the great Mahayagna, and she wishes to go. But Shiva says to her, don't go. We were not invited. And of course, he doesn't invite them because he snubs them, basically. But she says, no, this is my father and this is my family, and I'm going to go. And there's different versions of what happens at that point. One is that in the middle of this argument, this is at least one version of the story, that Sati gets very angry, and that's when she projects herself in 10 directions and becomes the Mahavidyas, letting Shiva know that not only the depth of her feminine power as Shakti, but also the fact that he himself has no life without Shakti. Like Shakti is him as well. So that is kind of a digression that we went into in the podcasts on the Mahavidyas. So this is at least one version of a story. There's other stories, too, where he's arguing with goddess Parvati rather than Sati per se. So, there's other, I guess possibly depending on where you are in India, there's different mutations of that story. Nonetheless, Shiva finally gives us permission to go, but he says to her, he's not happy about her going because he doesn't have a good feeling about it. So she goes. And to her surprise, it shouldn't be to her surprise, but she's snubbed by her family, and they're not happy to see her. And her father goes as far as to insult her husband. And this she cannot bear. So what she does is the sacrificial fire is lit, and she throws herself into it, and she immolates herself. Okay, and when Shiva realizes this, he is furious, and he sends a vengeful form of himself. And this, this vengeful form is called, I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's, let me see, I think I have the name that he adopts. Just give me a moment here to find it. Yeah, I've almost got it. Oh, Virhadra. That's the form that he takes. I couldn't quite remember what it was. But he appears in that form, and he destroys everything. He destroys the sacrifice. Now, the other gods tell him, it wasn't such a great idea because the sacrifice is really kind of necessary. But the whole thing is now inauspicious. It's been spoiled. It's destroyed. So Shiva does, because he's very quick to turn on a dime, he does make good on things, but he has cut Daksha's head off. Okay? And so, but there's kind of like, yeah, we really can't kill him. We kind of need him. So he ends up giving him the head of a goat. So Daksha is brought back. And of course, after this, Daksha becomes a devotee of Lord Shiva. But Sati is gone, and he takes the charred body of her away, and he's grief-stricken because and eventually Vishnu takes the body and severs it into pieces. and these pieces fall from the sky into places called Sati Pitam, and some of the major temples, some of the major goddess temples of Kali or Durga in these very much more extremely energetic forms are at the site of these pitas. Okay. There's one where her toe is supposed to be, and one where her spinal column is supposed to have formed. That's by Kanyakumari, where there's the Kanyakumari rituals associated with goddess Durga. So Durga is, so Parvati, so Sati is obviously critically important to Shiva, and if you follow Tantra, you have the idea of Shiva Shakti. Okay, they're kind of portrayed as being one in the form of Sri Ardhanarishvara, and also the Shiva Shakti are, nonetheless, you see the statues of the two of them like making love to each other, and you see this, I think, in I've seen it in both Hindu and Buddhist iconography, actually. The two of them, and as they make love, they sort of create the world. They create the universe. This is Shiva in his creative aspect. But Sati, and also, as we can see, has her destroyed or destructive aspect, and so does Shiva. So they are very, very potent energies that Shiva and Shakti represent. So Sati is gone, but she is eventually reincarnated as this goddess called Shailaputri, meaning daughter of the mountain. She's reincarnated as the daughter of the Himalayan mountains. And the sages and the gods understand that, she needs to marry Lord Shiva again. Like, Shiva and Shakti need to be reunited. Okay. And Parvati is in love with Shiva, but Shiva is deep in meditation, does not see her, and is not interested in her. So at first, Kama, the god of desire, tries to shoot Shiva with one of his arrows. He has very much like a function like Eros or Cupid, as we see taking the arrows of love and shooting at his victim. And then the victim falls in love with the person in front of him. But Shiva is not so easy to do. Once he gets he has the arrow and he sees her, he realizes what happens, and he opens up his third eye and he burns Kama to ashes. Now, Kama represents desire. Now, eventually, Sri Lalila Devi brings Kama back because desire needs to be part of the world. And there's probably a great statement about that we could, you could think about. So Shailaputri, she represents this form of Parvati that is this girl who's the daughter of the mountains, and she is going to, she is one who is eventually what she does is, in a different form, as we'll see, is the form of day 2. We see how she will appease Shiva and finally get him to notice her and to fall in love with her, and then eventually to marry her. Okay, but as Shailaputri, I can just read some of her story here. They do talk about they said that she is the absolute form of Mother Nature. She is the representation of the Muladhara chakra, so she is to do with the root. Okay, the root chakra is the abode of Shailaputri. And she is, let me just see what some of the rest of her story is here. So we have, so as the goddess of dealing with this Navaratri, or one of the Navadurgas, she is often shown carrying a lotus in one hand, trident in the other, and she rides on Nandi, which is the bull that belongs to Shiva. There's a in the Mahisasuramardini Stotra, it starts out with Ayigiri Nandini. She's this daughter of the mountain who rides on the bull, so that it's sort of a reference to her as this particular daughter. Now, they're saying from the yogic point of view, first Navaratri is considered to be auspicious. It's the yogic start for being in tune with Divine Mother Durga. Those who want to have any initiation in the Shakti mantras can have it on the first of Shukla Pratipada. And so, so what happens is Shailaputri becomes the essence of earthly existence and of the joy of of the earth and of being involved in the earth. So, so it's interesting that this has to do with feminine power, which is, of course, connected to the root, and the root is what is connected to the realm of the Chthonic. So, yeah. So this is mainly the story of Shailaputri. It's literally one little piece of the life of goddess Parvati. And Parvati is quite a powerful deity. I mean, she is, like I said, she is an incarnation of Shakti. She is, she's the spouse of Shiva. She is at least in some stories, she is said to turn into Mother Kali. And again, she has turned in other versions of the story that supposedly she's having a disagreement with Shiva. I don't know if they're playing a game and he doesn't win and he's not happy. I mean, that's another version of the story, and he goes to stomp out and she projects herself in the 10 directions. But nonetheless, Parvati, in this particular stage, kind of starts out as this sort of innocent girl who, the wide-eyed girl who kind of falls in love with Shiva. But Parvati is, she's, in spite of the appearances, I mean, this is always the complexity of the feminine as it's represented in Hindu mythology. There are some stories that are told that sort of simplify the whole, simplify the whole story. But, they tend to be representations of these multifaceted feminine that is a myriad of different kinds of things at once. It's very hard for the Western mind, again, which is sort of split between, well, is she a goddess that is auspicious or inauspicious, good or evil? And again, Shailaputri is considered to be quite auspicious. And generally, the honoring of her is brings, it invites prosperity and, and also, it's a celebration of nature and the environment as well. So they said she has her element is, her tattva is earth with the guna quality of coherence, and with the distinct characteristics of grana or smell. Okay, so these are all of the associations that you have with Shailaputri. Even more interesting here is just looking further into the symbolism of Devi Shailaputri as relating to the Muladhara chakra. I'm looking in this particular article is talking about how she Devi Shailaputri is considered the embodiment of patience, and upon awakening begins her journey from her father to her husband from the Muladhara or the root chakra. And of course she meets with Shiva when she reaches the third eye or the crown chakra, the Ajna or the Sahasrara at the top. And this is the rising of the Kundalini. So if we think about that, this is the energy that resides in the base of the spine. And if Shailaputri is the young girl who's kind of making the journey away from the root, which is the parental that's that kind of parental thing, the reproduction, but also survival, between the Muladhara and the Svadhisthana, which is the next one up. There is, there's this, so this is the start of the journey. And and he mentions here that it's considered the foundation of the energy body or Shakti, and the ultimate search for her husband requires patience and devotion, which Devi Shailaputri exemplifies. In Navaratri Puja, the first day is dedicated to yogis keeping their minds concentrated on the Muladhara to generate energy. This is the starting point of spiritual discipline. They start sadhana from here. Shailaputri is thus Muladhara Shakti to be realized within self and sought for higher depths in the yogic meditation. Okay, so Shailaputri is about foundations. And it's interesting that she's the daughter of the Himalayas, the daughter of the mountains, because the mountains, again, when we think about the mountains, they represent great heights, but they're also very foundational. You know what I mean? They represent the solid, the power of the earth and the solid firmament of the earth. And the mountains are a place often of great, power and earth energy if we go and we, pursue, spending time there in the mountains. So, so again, so we have this idea of the root and of this connection, which would also be why Shailaputri is considered to be the ultimate goddess of nature, because obviously the root is the thing that that connects us to the ground, in the same way that the trunk or the base or the roots of a tree would connect a tree into the ground to where it gets its nourishment from. But it's also, again, she represents a starting point. She's the beginning, the first deity of Navaratri, and she represents the kind of beginning of this cycle, this actual union of the masculine and feminine is what we're talking about. And so it's this movement from her, and again, if you want to speak in Jungian terms, this is the movement from the father to the animus too, right? I mean, it's the movement from that, or, in men, it could be from the mother to the anima. But, with this particular idea, it's these different embodiments of either masculine or feminine within the, within the person. Because the first, at least for a female, the first encounter of masculinity that, in theory, that she would have would be with the father, right? Or a father figure. It's the father is the, that's the first experience of the masculine that we have. And in having that experience, that tends to be the experience that shapes our relationships to men. Okay. Again, we're just speaking about women and men here, in particular here. Your relationship to, what we'll call the opposite sex here can be determined by, in a lot of ways, foundationally, by your relationship, not only, to both parents, but particularly to your father. Okay. And, this was something that was brought to my attention quite some time ago, because they say, the men you tend to pick, speaking just, I was speaking to somebody about, the men who tend to gravitate towards you, to some degree, that relationship will mirror your parental relationship. So in my case, having a mother who was sort of very much in control of things and having a father who was much more passive, I tended to attract men who were more passive. Okay. So just giving that as an illustration, a very generic illustration of how, one's fundamental root image, may translate as as that energy moves up to the kinds of energies that we attract to ourselves in terms of the masculine and the feminine. And whether those energies are entirely appropriate for us, I mean, there's probably, good or bad, to either one. But, the question of what's appropriate to us and to where we're going. So, and oftentimes it is the root. People who do kinds of, work on Kundalini work or chakra kind of work will find that root chakra is often the most difficult one. That is the one that is the most, I don't know how to put it. It's the one that seems to give people the most trouble, because oftentimes our foundations are shaky. We when we're nervous about what's unpredictable, when we're nervous about moving ahead in life, when we're nervous about moving ahead outside of the confines of the family. Okay, that can be a problem, or that can be a blockage that's connected to that particular center or region. And you can see that manifested. It would be as though Shailaputri, is in love with Shiva, but just decides, you know what, it's just safer to stay here. We're not going to do anything about it. But obviously, there are problems with that, because, as you grow, your energy needs to manifest and it needs to change. You can't stay in the root place that you were. So it has to be represented as a beginning and with something that's going to have some kind of forward movement, rather than something that's going to be stunted in that particular place. So Shailaputri would be, probably a good goddess to meditate on for people who are, who feel stuck, who foundationally feel like their foundations are shaken. Sometimes that can also happen after a tremendous tragedy of some kind, or something, or a life-changing event that you're not expecting to deal with. That usually you'll find if you do that kind of work, holistic work or energy work, you will find that it's the root chakra that is, the root or the sacrum, which is the one right above it, that tend to be, out of whack in some fashion and need to be, sorted out, and that foundation needs to be reestablished. And of course, anybody who's doing Kundalini energy work and that foundation is not solid, that could potentially be a problem. So, definitely an interesting time for thinking about the root, what it means to be rooted. Sometimes this has to do with connection to the family, but remember, as the Kundalini rises up as well, the Shakti is not, it's not meant to stay stationary in one point. The energy has to move. Otherwise, that can also, not having that energy can lead to other kinds of problems. There's this sort of lack of will to do anything, the fear or the lack of confidence to do anything or to express yourself or to open yourself up to other people can happen when things are very much stunted at the root. It's basically where all your power is just stuck at the bottom, as it were, and isn't tapped into and moved up. Now, when one does meditation, the state of samadhi that one will talk about, this is when you have the energy that rises to a point. And there's different kinds of samadhi. Okay, there's that that people experience. But when that energy moves up, when you're working, I will always advise that people work with a proper guru and have this done this way. But sometimes people have Kundalini awakenings through other means. And as always, I will never advise anybody to do anything like that by, going onto a YouTube video or something. Don't, unless you've already had that experience and you're already working with a trained guru, like don't play around with that thinking, I can awaken my own Kundalini, because, this was a conversation that was just had recently, actually, I think in connection even to presentation I'm going to be giving soon on the Morrigan. Who, while it doesn't specifically deal with Shakti, there are aspects of that particular worship and practice too that can affect those energetic centers, even though they're thought of differently, or it's something that's thought of differently. Your spinal column is your core nervous center. It's like the call center of your body, right? It's the central pillar from which all of your central power system. And you don't want to be, you don't want to go poking at different areas with a screwdriver. You want to be careful about how you are working with that kind of energy. So Shailaputri is a very good Devi to meditate on, to deal with issues of the root, and to make sure that you feel solid and stable in your root before you, meditate on, moving up that particular column to your full power. Just like you want to make sure you don't want to turn on an electrical breaker, if all the circuits if all the wires are not quite right, you don't want to start a fire, as it were, that will potentially be destructive. So I know I'm using a lot of metaphor here, but I've seen what happens when people energetically try to go into that kind of work and are not prepared for it. So it's not pretty. So if you don't want, it's a good reminder when it comes to this first Navadurga to make sure that you are working on your foundation and on your root. So that's really all I have to say about Shailaputri. There's not a whole, like I said, she doesn't have a whole lot of stories. It's just that she is literally the first, we look back at her and her incarnation as Sati. And I know I've talked about this in other podcasts too, so you can certainly go back to some of the ones on the Mahavidyas and also the ones I've done on Tantra intro to hear more about that aspect of Parvati and her connection to Shiva. We will get into how Parvati eventually gets Shiva as her man, and that we will talk about in the next podcast when we talk about Brahmacharini, and that will be, that who is the deity of day 2 of Navaratri. So, if you've been celebrating Navaratri this year, I hope it's been very auspicious for you and that you have the blessings of Devi. And, it will, and of course, but like I said, by the time these podcasts are released, we're going to probably be past Navaratri and more into the season heading towards Diwali. So, so I hope everybody stays well. And I just want to thank my listeners, thank my patrons. If you are, if you would like to follow my other work, please check out Chthonia.net. If you'd like to follow my private coaching, please go to and coaching, astrology, tarot, Reiki, human design. My links to everything are on liminalreiki.com. And if you also follow me there, I also have links to the other places where I actually work in person. So, you can get services in person or virtually with me. Details on that site. There's if you would like to be a supporter of this podcast, please check out patreon.com/Chthonia. And on social media, you can follow me. It's Chthonia Podcast, 2 words on Facebook, 1 word on Instagram or Twitter, and just Chthonia on YouTube. Thanks again so much for listening. Till the next episode.